And Moshe said, Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh your Elohim, Yahweh is one, and you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I am commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom to everyone worshiping with us at home. It's a blessing to have everyone here today. And the name of the message today is called, Who You Looking At? Have you ever heard those words? Who you looking at? If you have, what can you usually expect to happen next? Who you looking at? A fight, right? It usually means that someone is not very appreciative of being the visual center of another person's attention. And they are making the offending looker aware that the look is offensive, right? Who are you looking at? Most of us become a little uncomfortable whenever we notice that someone else is staring at us, don't we? You ever have that happen? Have you ever been in the grocery store or someplace and noticed that there's a little kid there about, I don't know, maybe about 2 or 3 years old, and they keep staring at you? You know, and has that ever happened to you? Yeah, sure it has. Now, we know that the child has not learned not to stare yet, you know? And so we don't walk up to the child and say, Who are you looking at? All right? But it still makes us feel a little bit awkward, doesn't it? Have you ever been innocently looking, not even at someone, just kind of staring off, and had them approach and say to you something like, Who are you looking at? Or, do I know you? Or, is there something wrong? Or some other similar comment to indicate that they're uncomfortable with your eyes being fixated in their general direction. Has that ever happened? Yeah, sure it has. Most of us have either had that happen or we've seen it happen to others, haven't we? And unless we are the type of person who likes fighting over such silly matters as this, we likely become humble and very apologetic towards the person who thought we were staring at them. That's because we seem to understand something, that there is such a thing as inappropriate looking. And it's inappropriate to be looking at someone like this, you know. And we either don't want to be accused of putting them under surveillance or violating their space with our eyes, or we don't want to be exposed, or should I say caught in the act of placing them in the center stage of the spotlight of our attention. Now, do you ever do that? I have. All right? You see someone in a store, and for whatever reason, you stop what you're doing so that you watch whatever it is that they're doing for a while, and use them for a moment or two for your own personal entertainment. You ever done that? Oh, you got to know you have. And if they see you looking at them, you start acting like you're doing something else, or you weren't looking at them, because you don't want to get busted for interloping into their affairs for your own personal entertainment. Do we ever do that? Yeah. Sure we do. We all do. We all know that there is inappropriate looking, and here's another one. How about this one? What if your husband or your wife or your fiance or fiancé, boyfriend or girlfriend, says to you, Who are you looking at? Now what happens? A fight, just like before. All right? This usually means that some spouse, fiance, boyfriend, or girlfriend is not very appreciative of the visual attention that their significant other is giving someone else, and is making the offending looker aware that their looking is inappropriate once again, right? And again, unless we are the kind of person who just loves a good fight, we're going to be quick to apologize, and hopefully, in a truthful way, prove to our loved one that we weren't actually looking at that other person with inappropriate thoughts or desires. Amen? Who said amen? Okay. This is, once again, because we seem to know that there is such a thing as inappropriate looking. And this is the kind of inappropriate looking that I want to talk about today and in this series. Because we are aware, are we not, once again, that there is such a thing as inappropriate looking. Yeah. But before I get too far, I want to give the viewers a parental advisory. This message is likely not suitable for all ages. It deals with adult topics like adultery, and adulterers and adulteresses, and pornography, as well as other sensitive subjects. It deals with the way in which Hasatan uses our natural desires to entice us to commit sin. And I want you to know, before you folks at home get too involved in the message, you may not even feel comfortable viewing it in mixed company. And you should know this before we go much further, just in case you need to adjust the audience in front of the television set. However, this message is given to Yahweh's people, and with the exception of pornography, the topics, though some extra scriptural witnesses will be used, come from Scripture. Pornography is adultery by looking at images, and Yahshua did say in a roundabout way that, well, let's just say he addressed that, inappropriate looking. They did not have magazines and videos in those days. But even even the principle guarding against pornography is found in the Scripture. And I will warn you ahead of time that this may be a tough lesson for some who hear it. But I want you to know this: the sword cuts both ways and towards both genders. Male and female, because none of us was without sin, no, not one. Additionally, this is complicated due to the complexity of human behavior and the real differences between men and women, because there are real differences between men and women. And like I said, it's going to be done in 3 parts. All right, turn with me to Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5. We're going to start reading in verse 27. You heard that it was said to those of old, Yahshua speaking here, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone looking at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. And if your right eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out and throw it away from you, for it is better for one part of your members that one part of your members perish than for your entire body to be thrown into Gehenna. Exodus chapter 20. Shemot chapter 20. We're going to be on page 78. And if you look at verse 14, it says, you do not commit adultery. As a matter of fact, we even see that the looking and the desiring is addressed here too. Look at verse 17. You do not covet your neighbor's house. You do not covet your neighbor's wife. nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, or whatever belongs to your neighbor. The word covet here means desire. Desire, lust, and covet are all synonymous with one another. You're not to covet your neighbor's wife. And that would include for inappropriate purposes, because you're not to commit adultery either, right? Right? And Matthew 5:28 says, "But I say to you that everyone looking at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart." So, where did the trouble that YHWH was talking about here get started? It gets started in the eyes and looking, which in turn takes the mind to places in our heart where one visualizes. Right? In other words, we see in our mind's eye to do things that the Torah says that we are not to do. Right? But I say to you that everyone looking at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Right? Does that mean that the ladies are off the hook here and have no culpability in this affair? After all, it does say everyone looking at a woman to lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Are they, the women, only the innocent objects of lecherous masculine obsession? Is this a for men only teaching? Ask this question. Did the woman look at herself so as to prepare herself in fashion so that she looks desirable, attractive? We all know what attractive means, right? Don't we? Dictionary.com says, number 1, attractive, providing pleasure or delight, especially in appearance or manner. Pleasing, charming, alluring. You know what the root word of allure is? Lure. All right? A woman sitting in front of the mirror for 45 minutes working on her hair, her makeup, her outfit is not trying to attract a shopping cart. Okay? She's trying to make herself look attractive to the opposite sex, unless, of course, there's some deeper problem. All right? If she is, now go with me here, if she is looking at herself in front of the mirror so as to make herself look attractive and desirable, and remember, desire and covet and lust are all synonymous, then she is part of the everyone looking at a woman to lust for her. Do you see that? Do you understand that? Adultery is a stoning offense, okay? YHWH is telling us to mind our eyes. All right, in verse 29 of Matthew 5 it says, "And if your right eye causes you to stumble, pluck it out and throw it away from you. For it is better for you that one of your members perish than for your entire body to be thrown into Gehenna." So who are you looking at? Turn with me to James chapter 1. Jacob chapter 1. Page 1174. The old ISR. And we're going to start reading in verse 13. "Let no one say when he is enticed, I am enticed by Elohim, for Elohim is not enticed by evil matters, and he entices no one. But each one is enticed when he is drawn away by his own desires." Remember, that's what got Hawa in trouble. His own desires and trapped. Then, when desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it has been accomplished, brings forth, what's that last word? Death. Is temptation sin? Nope. Hasatan tempted Yahshua, and yet Yahshua was without sin. Right? But unless we are proactive to stop it, sin will become manifest, and sin, what we just read, when it has been accomplished, brings forth death. Now, there's a couple of books that I highly recommend. I want to talk about them a little bit. The first one is called For Women Only. It was written by Sean T. Felden. And the second is For Men Only, written by her husband Jeff and Sean T. together. The books were written based on extensive surveys taken from large control groups of men and women, as well as many man and women on the street surveys. Ladies, if you will read this book, For Women Only, you will gain a wealth of insight into the perplexing things about your man which he desperately wants you to know but has no idea how to express it. Things like how he is wired, why he does the things that he does, especially the things that drive you crazy and sometimes drive you to tears. And good or bad, you will likely learn that neither of you are insane, but rather that he is more likely, like every other man around, than you might think. You'll also learn about internal struggles that he's afraid for you to know about. The encouraging thing, though, is that once you have learned these things, you will become better prepared to get the love from your man that you desperately want and that he actually wants to give you, believe it or not. Men, the same goes for you if you read For Men Only. You will gain a wealth of insight into the perplexing things about your woman, which she desperately wants you to know but has no idea how to express it. Things like, matter of fact, it's not that she doesn't know how to express it, she doesn't know why you just don't get it. All right? Things like how she's wired and why she does the things that she does, especially things that drive you crazy and sometimes drive you to rage. And good or bad, you'll likely learn that neither she nor you are insane, but rather that she's more like every other woman around than you might think. You'll also learn about internal struggles that she can't seem to let go of. The encouraging thing, though, is that once you've learned these things, you will become better prepared to get the admiration from your woman that you desperately want and that she actually wants to give you, believe it or not. There are two problems with this, though. A man will read hunting books to learn to be a better hunter. He will. He'll read fishing books, learn how to catch a big bass. He'll read golfing books to find out how to get a better swing. He'll read farming books, learn how to be a better farmer. He'll read financial books, learn how to be a better investor. He'll read automotive magazines to find out how to get more horsepower out of that engine. He'll read Sports Illustrated to find out how to be a better sportsman in whichever sport he likes. And that's the problem with Sports Illustrated. Most men have no problem realizing that in many aspects of their lives, they can learn to be better without feeling deficient in the meantime. But most men, even though they have more of their life's efforts invested in their marriages than any other thing in their lives, most men have this tremendous, enormous, real aversion to reading anything that remotely resembles a relationship book. I think that the main reason is because we feel like if we need to read a relationship book, it must mean that she thinks that we're defective and we're not measuring up to her expectations. Hey, I'm the same guy that she fell in love with originally, right? She's the one who raised the bar, right? Women, on the other hand, have no aversion at all to reading relationship books. They don't. They instinctively know that their relationship with their man could always be better. Amen? Isn't that right, ladies? It can always be better. And they will oftentimes read just as many relationship books as it takes to get him straightened out. Right? Yep. I recommend these books to both of you. Now, if you read them, they will help you give and get that which will make your lives more joyful. One of the things that we learn about women is that women have a much harder time compartmentalizing things that are troubling them. Even things that we men think have been resolved years ago will pop up and turn into an issue, even an argument that you thought was dealt with and settled long, long ago. The book likens them to pop-ups on a computer screen. Have you ever found yourself cruising down information superhighway and these annoying pop-ups, come up, and before you know it, you're 5 websites away from what you were originally looking at? That's happened to me before. Most women do not have a pop-up blocker installed. And she can't help herself. She comes hardwired the way Yahweh made her. She comes hardwired from the factory that way, and there's nothing that you can do to stop it. All you can do is give her reassurance until she can get it minimized. Anybody relate to this? And saying things like, "Why are you worrying about that? I thought that was settled a long time ago," is not reassuring, fellas. That is not reassuring to your lady. Reading the book can help you learn what she needs and how to give it to her so that she can close the pop-up. But if you have a woman in your life, you are going to be involved with someone who is wired differently than you, gentlemen. I'd like to say it ain't so, but it's so. Men have a different type of pop-up to deal with, though. This is addressed in a section called the Keeper of the Mental Rolodex. I don't know about the younger people. How many people here know what a Rolodex is? Okay, that's good. Most of the younger people know what they are. It's a device in which you keep index cards with business and personal contact information. You just can't look up a number in the Rolodex without viewing a bunch of other index cards in the process. From where you started looking and where the card is that you're looking for, there's a bunch of other stuff to see in between. Many of the men surveyed in these books were devoted husbands involved in regular attendance at worship, as well as ministers. And what we discovered is that nearly all men suffer with a common problem. That problem being sexual visualization and mental temptation, actually about 98%. And I think the other 2% may be less than truthful. Or blind. Men who regularly attend worship are more inclined to fight the temptation and complain about how hard it is to force things out of their mind. Who do you suppose was the most righteous person in the Scripture behind Yeshua? Maybe Job? Let's turn to Job chapter 31. Huh? Yeah, I did. I could have said those are all good answers, but that's not the one I was thinking of. Job 31. We're going to be on page 775. Job 31. We're going to start reading in verse 1. I have made a covenant with my eyes. How then could I gaze at a maiden? Okay, what do we use our eyes for? Looking. For what is the portion of Eloah from above and the inheritance of the Almighty from on high? Is it not calamity to the perverse? And strangeness to the workers of wickedness? Does he not see my ways and number all my steps? If I have walked with falsehood, or if my foot has hurried to deceit, let him weigh me in a right scale, and let Eloah know my integrity. If my step does turn from the way, or my heart has gone after my eyes, or if any spot has clung to my hands, let me sow and another eat, and let my harvest be rooted out. If my heart has been enticed by a woman. Wow. Job. If my heart, who would have thought it? You know? If my heart has been enticed by a woman, or if I have lurked at my neighbor's door, let my wife grind for another, and let others bow down over her. For that would be a wicked scheme and a punishable crookedness. For that would be a fire that burns to destruction and take root among all my increase. So we see here that Job wrestled with the same problem. Job was not a pervert. As a matter of fact, he was condemning perverseness earlier. He was a righteous man. Amen? All right? He was also part of that 98%. And yet he made a covenant with his eyes. So we need to realize that righteous men struggle. Did you hear that word? Struggle with this. Now, how many of you ladies enjoy struggling with personal failures? You know, within your own makeup. I don't know what it might be, whether diet, or maybe you whisper to your friends more than you ought to, or how many of you enjoy struggling with those kind of things, shortcomings? Do you know that you could be guilty of causing your brothers in Yeshua to struggle? You, ladies, could be causing your brothers in Yeshua to struggle. Just like Job. Most men say that they would turn this off in an instant if they could. Righteous men, that is. Giving into looking has gotten many a Tov man in trouble. Look at 2 Samuel chapter 11. Second Samuel chapter 11, starting in verse 1. And it came to be at the turn of the year, at the time sovereigns go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him, and all Israel, and they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. And it came to be at evening time that David rose up from his bed and walked about on the roof of the sovereign's house, and from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very good to, what are those next two words? Look at. And David sent and asked about the woman. Well, that kind of sounds like what James is talking about. And one said, is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? And David sent messengers to fetch her, and she came to him, and he lay with her. For she was cleansing herself from her uncleanliness, and she returned to her house. And the woman conceived, and sent and informed David, and said, I am pregnant. Then David went to Joab, send Uriah the Hittite to me. And Joab sent Uriah to David, and Uriah came to him, and David asked how Joab was doing, and how the people were doing, and how the fighting was going. And David said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." And Uriah went out from the sovereign's house, and a gift from the sovereign followed him. And Uriah laid down at the door of the sovereign's house with all the servants of his master, and did not go down to his house. And they informed David, saying, "Uriah did not go down to his house." So David said to Uriah, Did you not come from a journey? Why did you not go down to your house?" And Uriah said to David, "The ark and Israel and Yehudah are dwelling in booths, and my master Joab and the servants of my master are encamped in the open field. And should I go to my house and eat and to drink and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your being lives, let me not do this." And David said to Uriah, "Remain here today also, and tomorrow I'll let you go." So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. And David called him, and he ate and drank before him, and he made him drunk. And at evening he went out to lie on his bed with the servants of his master, but he did not go down to his house. And it came to be in the morning that David wrote a letter to Joab, and sent it by the hand of Uriah. And he wrote in the letter, saying, "Set Uriah in front of the heaviest battle, and you shall turn away from him, and he shall be smitten and shall die." Wow. And it came to be, as Joab watched the city, that he appointed Uriah to the place where he knew there were brave men, and the men of the city came out and fought with Joab. And some of the people of the servants of David fell, and Uriah the Hittite also died. And Joab sent and reported to David all the events of the battle, and commanded the messenger, saying, "When you have finished reporting all the events of the battle to the sovereign, then it shall be, if the sovereign's wrath rises, and he says to you, 'Why did you go so near to the city when you fought? Did you know that they would shoot from the wall? Who smote Abimelech, the son of Jerubasheth? Was it not a woman who threw an upper millstone on him from the wall, so that he died in Thebets? Why did you go near the wall?' Then you shall say, 'Your servant Uriah the Hittite is also dead.'" And the messenger went and came and reported to David all which Joab had sent him. And the messenger said to David, "The men have been mighty against us, and came out to us in the field, but we drove them back as far as the entrance of the gate. And the archers shot from the wall at your servants. And some of the sovereign's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is also dead." And David said to the messenger, "Say to Joab, do not let this matter be evil in your eyes, for the sword devours one as well as another. Strengthen your attack against the city and overthrow it, and encourage him." And the wife of Uriah heard, and Uriah her husband was dead, and she lamented for her husband. And when her mourning was over, David sent and brought her to his house, and she became his wife, and bore him a son. But the deed that David had done was evil in the eyes of Yahweh. Do you see how much trouble came from a man looking inappropriately at a woman who was inappropriately presenting herself? You got to figure that she knew she was in the sight of the sovereign. They didn't have telescopes in those days. A man was killed. All sorts of deception took place. The baby winds up dying. Inappropriate looking can get a man after Elohim's own heart in trouble. Now, I do want to make a clarification about something that I said earlier. I'm not talking about a woman's natural desire to want to be pretty. Okay? Debbie and I were talking about this one week after service, and she was pointing out, even little girls, 2 years old, will oftentimes sit and brush their hair and dress up, right? She doesn't know anything about inappropriateness. And though this is not a hard, fast rule, it certainly is a most common thing. It's natural for a little girl to want to be pretty, as it is for little boys to be adventurous. It is as natural for a woman to want to be pretty as it is for a man to be mighty. The Scripture has plenty of passages referring to the beauty and prettiness of women. All right? Yahweh made women, and He made them pretty. After all that Job went through, in the last 4 verses of the book, one of the last things that we see that Yahweh blessed him with was more children. Turn with me to Job chapter 42. Page 783. Look what it says about the daughters of which he was blessed. Job 42, verse 15. And in all the land were found no women so pretty as the daughters of Job. And their father gave them an inheritance among their brothers. Isn't that interesting? Look at Genesis chapter 24. On page 23. Actually, we're going to be looking on page 22. Genesis 24 and verse 16, it says, And the young woman was very good looking, a maiden, no man having known her. And she went down to the fountain, filled her jar, and came up. Look at Genesis 26:7. And when the men of the place asked about his wife, he said, She is my sister. For he was afraid to say that she is my wife, thinking lest the men of the place should kill me for Rebekah, because she is good looking. You see, there are many passages in the Scripture that speak of a woman's beauty in a complimentary way. I'm not talking about that. I want to clear that up. I'm not talking about making yourself pretty. I'm talking about an out-of-control desire to be pretty, and especially by the world's standards. John Eldridge, the author of Wild at Heart, wrote, Whatever the specific terrain you are called to, at home, at work, in the realm of the arts or industry or world politics, you will always encounter 3 enemies: the world, the flesh, and the devil. Wow. We'll get into that more at another time. But are we fighting against these enemies, or are we embracing these enemies and joining in league with them? What I'm talking about is spending an inordinate amount of time on yourself so as to be attractive, so as to give in to these enemies, to satisfy a desire of your flesh, to conform to the standards of the world and how the world defines beauty, and to be used by the devil knowingly or unknowingly. When Debbie and I were talking about this, I pointed out to her that the root word of attractive is, of course, attract. And we all know what attract means, right? She said that that's not what most women mean when they say attractive. They don't mean it in the sense that they're trying to attract. And I told her that I think that it would probably be a good idea if, instead of using that word, we use a different word like pretty then. You see, words do mean things. And whether we mean it in that sense of to attract or not, in all too many situations, to attract is the result. Does it show cleavage? Even a little. Is it form-fitting? In other words, does it hug the curves? Does it flash flesh? Does it give into the enemies? The flesh, the world, and the devil. I personally know of some people who had put pictures on social media where they were at the Feast of Tabernacles. This included pictures of the women in bikinis. The minister received a letter asking, Where do your women hang their tzitzits on their bikinis? And you know what? That's a sermon wrapped up in one short question. The zeitzeits to be warned to remember to keep all that Yahweh commands us. Amen. And perhaps if they had put them on their bikinis, they would have remembered not to uncover their nakedness. Because bikinis are underwear that you wear, parade around at the beach, at the pool. All right? But you see, they were not resisting the flesh and the world and the devil. They were giving in to the enemies and being conformed to the world. Look at Romans chapter 12. Romans chapter 12. Page 1097. Starting in verse 1, it says, I call upon you, therefore, brothers, through the compassion of Elohim, to present your bodies a living offering, set apart, well-pleasing to Elohim, your reasonable worship. And do not be conformed to this world. We need to read that again, don't we? And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you prove what is that good and well-pleasing and perfect desire of Elohim. James chapter 4. We've got two more passages to read. James chapter 4, page 1196. Verse 7. So then, subject yourselves to Elohim. Resist the devil, and he shall flee from you. Draw near to Elohim, and he shall draw near to you. Cleanse hands, sinners, and cleanse the hearts, you double-minded. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning and your joy to dejection. Humble yourself in the sight of the Master, and he shall lift you up. And our last passage today is in the same book, chapter 1. In verse 14. I read this before. But each one is enticed when he is drawn away by his, and I could say her, own desires and trapped. Then when desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it has been accomplished, brings forth death. We'll stop here this week and pick it up at our next study. But in the meantime, I've got a question for each one of you, men and women. Who are you looking at? Yevroteka Yahweh Ba'ish Mareka, Yair Yahweh Panavaleka Vikaneka, Yasa Yahweh Panavaleka Viasem Laka Shalom. Yahweh bless you and guard you. Yahweh make his face to shine upon you and show favor to you. Yahweh lift up his face upon you and give you his complete contentment.